Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour over 6 years ago in the throes of the pandemic just to help us all stay connected. And although the throes have changed, we still like that feeling of connection to other human beings through wonderful human written stories every single Wednesday. So here we are. We have another two wonderful human writers with their wonderful human, probably, stories written by humans, for sure. But they may be a little weirder than baseline humanity. The stories, the writers are totally normal. And tonight's readers are one many of you know, Douglas Gwilym, and we also have Jocelyn Szczepaniak-Gillece. If you are here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat. If you're joining us on YouTube, leave us a comment or a little thumbs up thingy so that we know we did good. It's really nice. So our first reader tonight is Jocelyn Szczepaniak-Gillece. Jocelyn Szczepaniak-Gillece is a writer of the strange, the surreal, and the horrifying, with publications in places like Weird Horror, Nightshades, Nyctalokos, and others. Her experimental eco-horror novel, Poltergeist, is out with Apocalypse Confidential. She teaches film studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She didn't mention that she has a story nominated for a Bram Stoker Award this year, but I wasn't going to let her leave that out. So, Jocelyn, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's really, really exciting. Really exciting to be here and really exciting to have that Stoker nom this year. It's kind of bananas. So, I'm not going to read the story that's nominated for the Stoker Award this evening because that will actually be narrated on Tales to Terrify very soon. So that's coming out really soon there.
Awesome. They do a great job.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited. I don't know who's narrating it. I'll get to find out when it's released. But tonight I'm going to read a story from the autumn 2025 issue of Exacting Clam, which is an amazing literary magazine put out by Sagging Meniscus, the really fantastic small literary press. And this story is called The Mandrake. So I guess with that, I'll just start reading it. Okay, the Mandrake. Mandrake, whose secrets grow seductively beneath the stone, I cannot uproot. And that is a quote from Wolfgang Hilbig from On Intonation. We must have pulled it out too soon. It had grown in plain sight in the village square between the church and the ancient wooden stake, whose purpose no one remembered. The top leaves seemed green enough to yank, but when we wrapped the dog's rope around it and beckoned the cur toward the fresh meat we held, the plant groaned, sent crumbled dirt and earthworms scattering, and let out a sound like the gates of hell cranking open. The woman came tearing down the road, her hair like spider webs and her eyes blazing. Cover your ears, she screamed. It's not midnight, and you have no ivory staff. You fools, cover your ears. The farmer's boy, the youngest of us, stared dumbfounded at her, his jaw slackening and his head tilting. At first he seemed frozen by fascination, but she was nothing more than a wise woman. Saliva poured from his open mouth and cascaded down his chin. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed, shaking, on the ground. Stop them up! Stop up those holes in your heads, you idiots, the woman shouted, throwing plugs of moss and clay at us. But it was so hard to hear her past the frantic, high-pitched shriek rising up from the ground. Most of the plant's tangled roots were now up above the dirt, and they resembled a tiny, hairy person with a wide-open mouth. Thick leaves sprang from the top of what looked like its head, a crowning glory above its desiccated skin. The dog tipped over, dead before it hit the ground. The youngest of us lay next to him, twitching slower and slower until his movements came to a complete stop and his head lolled unnaturally to the side, his tongue hanging out like a salted gray snail, half fled from its shell. The plant's bellowing was a sonic death spiral, horrendous, wrapping us up in its whirlpool crescendo like an entire village burning to the ground. I couldn't think. I could barely see. I was turning to nothing but an enormous ear swiveling toward the uprooted plant and its stabbing exclamations. We were all becoming one in the wave of common pain. I fell to my knees, my hands tearing out chunks of my hair, anything to feel something other than the sound like rivets pounding into my eardrums. It was an invasion, that noise, a cataclysm. Viking boats landing ashore and the pike and the torch with them. My brain no longer my brain. Those of us farther from the plant and still with our wits about us grabbed at the moss where it hit us in the calves or the knees or the shoulders. 2 plugs landed in a puddle by my right ankle, and I grabbed at them and stuffed my head holes with them, sopping wet as they were, stinking as they were, those disgusting objects from a foul woman who smelled like powdered snake and dried rosemary and vinegar brine, nothing nice at all, nothing like the girls we wanted to marry and their lily-scented hair. An instant relief washed over me. The kindness of silence, the bliss of the interior of my head being mine again, dominion over my own territory. The other young men of the village dotted the square, some still tearing maniacally at their bodies, some sitting down with plugs in their ears. The youngest and the dog lay dead next to one another. And between them, swallowing the light of the dawning sun like a black diamond, the wretched mandrake, tertiary roots like spindly, ineffectual limbs, the hole in the middle of its face open in a bloated emission. Of course I knew the danger. Mandrake hunting was not for the faint of heart. One must follow the old ways when harvesting the mandrake, or risk the loss of his own life. But I also knew that rarest of plants rewarded he who conquered it. The mandrake cured demonic ills, brought luck to its possessor, even bestowed the gift of second sight for those brave enough to taste it. And those powers were of great value to magicians and traders alike. The mandrake was both curse and blessing, and most of all, the mandrake was worth many times its weight in gold. No one had pulled up a mandrake in years. From what I had been told, the mandrakes had all been harvested to extinction at least a century ago by sorcerers traveling west from the Urals, magi coming north from the lands below and across the sea. If only they were found in our mountain village, then maybe we'd have fine plates and furs for trousseaux again. Maybe the children would come out strong from the womb, fed well on transmuted butterfat and thick cabbage leaves, rather than sickly and with yellow bags under their eyes. There might be hope then that the smartest among us would stay here after adolescence and help us all learn how to face the brave new world instead of hopping a carriage for Prague at the first opportunity and never returning home. And then word came that a mandrake had been spotted on a hunting trip. 2 young men from the village, alone with their bows for the first time, eyes glued to the ground for deer tracks, saw the telltale upright burst of leaves with emerald-tinged veins, the beginnings of exuberant purply flowers, a plant just begging to be tugged up from its rest. They came back that day talking a mile a minute about how they needed to read the manuscripts and gather up the boys, how this was the chance. Where there was one, there must be many, and where there are many, there was money. It would be better for everyone if they were all gone, the priest nodded when I asked him after matins. Those who work in alchemy will never know God's presence. The light of Jesus makes a mockery of earthen magics and prestidigitation. See how I touch the host and it becomes his body. The priest held the wafer up to the light, rosy and blue as it streamed through the stained glass window's filter. The wafer looked the same as it had a moment before. The priest covered it with a silken cloth and placed it in the tabernacle with a store of other consecrated breads ready for blessings or exorcisms. Don't go with them, he said. It won't end well. You'll have to involve the woman. The woman lived in the woods less than half a kilometer off the hunting trail. She had always been there, or a version of her had always been there. The cottage was a few hundred years old. Whether the woman was also a few hundred years old, or she had merely taken the place of another woman in a succession of women, was not for me to decide. It was enough to know that the woman held a place in a line that, despite its lack of maternal reproduction, was its own kind of genealogy. Most of the time, we pretended the woman wasn't there. You learned early on that when mention of her was made, you spat out of the left side of your mouth and rubbed the saliva into the dirt with your right foot. Every few months, she came to the village market and sold her herbs and preserved vegetables for salt and blacksmith skills. She was tolerated then because there was a benefit to her appearance. Otherwise, we ignored her as best we could, except in very particular circumstances. You went to the woman when you were in need. Usually, these were women's needs: fertility, romance, jealousy, desperation. Women have so many needs. A man rarely made his way there. If he did, he was sheepish and accompanied by a lover. But I wouldn't have been surprised to learn that most of the women in the village had, at some point or another, gone to see the woman. It wouldn't have surprised me at all. My sister once had need of the woman and begged me to go with her. She was due to be married off in the fall to the widowed baker, but through summer's long and hazy nights, she had absconded many times with a boy from the village. Now there was a problem. If it wasn't solved, the priest wouldn't bless her marriage. Our mother couldn't know, she told me. Our father would kill her. She couldn't go alone. She needed me. My sister's voice was rich and pearlescent when she ululated in sonic shapes with other girls in the village. But she hadn't made much of any noise in days. She turned her dark eyes to me, and they filled with tears. I couldn't bear my sister crying. I wanted to hear her sing again. We pretended to join a small search party for a neighbor's goat gone missing, and peeled off from the group to follow a dark path. The woods opened up, and we stood in a little makeshift yard, fenced in with squat posts and filled with wooden boxes of flowering salvias and monkshood, sprawling vegetable plants, and intricately carved birdhouses balanced on stakes. Goldfinches and nuthatches swooped through the elderberry and witch hazel, and St. John's wort bushes came alive with hundreds of hungry bees. In the middle of all that abundance, the woman's thatched cottage stood, with whitewashed walls and an array of painted flowers and calligraphy winding around every opening. The woman came to the cottage door, her eyes on fire and her dress old-fashioned, and her silver-streaked hair writhing all blue and electric like a nest of snakes. But her face was much younger than I thought it would be, and she took my sister's small hand with her long and graceful one. I ducked behind a tree and waited for hours, tying blades of grass into wreaths and dozing under blossoming branches as the sun made its way through the sky. When my sister emerged, she looked exhausted but determined, and after we went home, we never spoke of that afternoon again. In short, I knew little of the woman, but what I did know was complicated by a dense thicket of secrets and love. There seemed little for us left in the village. The priest collected our tithes and complained that we gave too little. Parents grew feeble and unable to work the fields. Children emerged with sores and cried throughout the night. The farmers fertilized the earth and spread last year's seeds in rows, but what came in summer was thin and diseased. We used it to feed our children and our parents, and there was little left for us. We were all very tired. I saw this future for myself, and I didn't want it. I worked at my whittling and taught myself carving skills. I consolidated what I owned and consulted the carriage schedules for Prague. But then my sister married and soon had a new baby in her, and I dreaded what would come next. Before I left the village, I determined I would do what I could to make sure she sang again. And so, although I had aided at the altar since I was a young boy, I didn't heed what the priest had to say. Not many of us really did beyond Sundays. We listened to his sermons, we gave him plum brandy when he came to our houses, we let him think he was essential. Though we didn't say it out loud, we knew that his approach was both useful and untrue. When night turned to dawn, I packed up my carving knives and yesterday's loaf of bread from my sister's husband's oven and met the other men in the square. Together, we turned toward the way I had walked the year before with my sister. None of the men had been to the woman, at least none that wanted to own up to it. "This is the way, I think," the apprentice smith, the most confident of us, said, gesturing down the forest path. I kept quiet because no one could ever make me betray my sister, and followed what I knew was the right way toward the woman's cottage. All the birds fled in panic as the men sang drinking songs and hacked at underbrush. They tromped with heavy feet into the woman's garden and grabbed at the fruits ripening on the vine. "Come out, woman," the apprentice smith boomed, banging on the cottage door with the wooden end of a hatchet. Tell us how to harvest the mandrake. Several other men threw coins the color of the woman's hair at the door, as tradition demanded. The silver dropped to the stone step, clinking and sparkling in the sun. A window's shutters flew open to reveal the top half of the woman. She stood there, bright against the interior gloom, stiff-shouldered like a statue, lips set in stone. I'll tell you, she said, but I don't recommend this. You don't know how to do it, nor even why you might. We'll sell it, the banker said. Our money is old and worthless, and we need new coins from new lands to buy the things we need. We need new knives, the butcher said. I've heard about some arriving from across the ocean, perfectly consistent from one to the next. We need new threshing machines, the farmer's boy said. Those who use them have tender and soft hands and sleep past daybreak. We need new medicines, the apothecary attendant said. Pills and capsules instead of dried herbs and tinctures. We need new fabrics, the tailor said, ones that shine and slip so that we no longer look like country people. We need a new altarpiece, the priest said, and all the men turned in shock to see that he had followed us on our journey. Yes, the church too has need, he said. God is unchanged, but the times are not. The woman's lips stayed knit together, and she paused for several moments. At last, she gave a curt nod. You'll regret it, she said, but you'll forget it eventually. I'll regret this until I die. But I've already seen my fate, and it is wrong to try to deceive destiny. Come with me. The woman came outside with a leather-bound tome and a basket topped with moss. Together, we walked back along the pathway and into the forest. That's it, that's where it should be, the apothecary attendant shouted, pointing at a withered stalk. The woman shook her head. What makes you think you know what mandrake looks like, she sneered. You fools, you have no idea. The woman led the way, and soon I realized we were walking back to the village. The woman guided us to the town square and stopped across from the church steps and the stake. There, she said, and pointed to her feet. An unassuming cluster grew between two paving stones. If I'd had noticed it, I'd have assumed it a weed. But now I could see the telltale fan-like shape, the fleshy and glossy leaves lined with celery-clear stems, the globular purple flowers almost obscene in their rich indigo, the yellow berries just starting to tempt birds. At the threshold of God's house, the priest murmured, it must be a sign. The apprentice smith ran over to the plant and bent down. No, the woman shouted, not like that. You must follow the old ways. Yes, she said, staring at the priest, even you. And so the men noted what the woman told them was needed. A dog, a rope, fresh meat to tempt the dog, an ivory staff. Wait until midnight the next full moon, the woman instructed us. It's a fortnight hence. But don't say I didn't warn you, and I won't say it when you come for me. With that, she vanished back into the forest, leaving us clustered around the plant. Each of the men took turns standing guard for the next few days, making sure no drunk urinated on it, no goat came through and gnawed the leaves. It grew lusher and sent out more berries. The tailor shooed off the catbirds that tried to claim them. The priest blessed the site with the sign of the cross. Everyone searched their houses for an ivory staff. But the men grew impatient. Farmers cursed their mildewed sprouts. Children cried for food that wasn't on the table. Wives begged for butter and thread. When a baby was born dead, its head barely attached to its spindly neck, impulse took over. Enough of this, the farmer's boy said. My cousin will birth in 2 days, and I can't have her baby come out like that, all green and still. It's time. I said nothing, but I thought of my sister and the baby growing inside her. And so I gathered with the men in the small hours of the next morning, as they dragged the mangy dog to the square and tied one end of a rope around it, the other end to the mandrake. The sun began to rise. The dog salivated and lunged toward the meat. The mandrake sprang up from the ground. And when the mandrake sprang up from the ground, it screamed like a banshee. And when it screamed like a banshee, we were coursed with great pain, and we too screamed with all our might. And when we too screamed with all our might, a curious thing happened. My scream was my brother's scream, was my brother's scream, was my brother's scream. And my brother's scream became mine in the common pain. And the common pain radiated out from where the withered idol, the mandrake, lay among us. And the mandrake lay among us until we came at last to our senses and gathered it up. And we gathered it up with the youngest of us who lay there dead, and without ceremony we buried him. And we buried him, but left the dog to rot in the baking summer sun. And in the baking summer sun, all of us men felt a great and common rage rise within us, and the fury transformed us to a wretched black swarm, and we cursed the woman for her betrayal. And her betrayal demanded punishment, so we marched as one to her cottage. And her cottage stood before us, and we tore down the door, intent on dragging her out. But she had already donned her burial shroud, and she held out her wrists to us so that we might bind her hands. And her hands grew bloodied and raw with the pulling on the rope, as we dragged her like a dog to the village square and the stake. And the stake we knew now was always meant for the woman, and we tied her to her destiny atop a pile of wood. And the priest brought a candle from the church, and as we lit the woman on fire, she cursed us all, and her hair shone like dragonflies in the rising sparks. And the rising sparks caught the church, and the church blazed like the eyes of the woman. And the woman and the church burned long through the night and in the morning. And in the morning we kicked at the ash left from the carcasses and uncovered the only smoldering remainder, the dog's jawbone. And the dog's jawbone was taken up by all of us and lifted above our heads and nailed to the town gate. And the town gate swung open, and the road overflowed with horses and carts and people eager to buy and to sell, and the world was full of things we were on the precipice of knowing, and we bowed down in awe before the magnificent day that dawned upon us. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Oh, so freaky. Just like a real folk tale.
Thank you.
I love Mandrake lore, although I'm one of those weird people who thinks they're actually kind of cute.
They are kind of cute. I really love the wonderful website, the Public Domain Review had an amazing piece on mandrakes in manuscripts about a year ago with really, really gorgeous illustrations from about the 13th to the through the 18th century, and they're just like amazing, amazing.
Yeah, and they're actually not that weird looking as plants, but
No.
I still have "We Bow Down" ringing in my ears. The finale, the final sentence. It's like, okay. Well played, Jocelyn.
well played indeed.
Thank you.
Well, that was a good story hour debut.
Yeah. Well, I'll say.
It is our way at Story Hour to just take a moment between the readers to let the first story sink in, or let it ring in our ears, or whatever metaphor works best. And then be ready for another story. Everyone, that was Jocelyn Szczepaniak-Gillece. And next up, we have Douglas Gwilym. Douglas Gwilym, who I really shouldn't even need a bio written out for. He's been on so much. He is a Bram Stoker Award nominated author and editor who has been known to compose a weird fiction rock opera or two, which is, you know, one or two more than most of us, right? So that's pretty cool. His story, Poppy's Poppy, was a finalist for a Stoker in 2023, and Year 6 made Ellen Datlow's recommended reading list for Best Horror 14. He co-edits The Midnight Zone, first edition, Novus Monstrum, a collection of never-before-seen monsters featuring greats and new talent in strange dark fiction. He reads classics of the proto-weird on YouTube and taught at Alpha Young Writers Workshop. Put his stories into your brain at Lamplight, Shoreline of Infinity, Dark Horses, The Magazine of Weird Fiction, Tales from the Moonlit Path, and Penumbric, or listen at Creepy Podcast and Tales to Terrify. Douglas, welcome back.
Thanks, Laura. I think I'm going to give you a shorter version of that.
But it's all fun to say, Douglas.
And I've been up to other things too. I got to host here a couple of times, which was wonderful. And then I got the bug to host at Tales to Terrify. Yeah, I hosted their episode 740, and I'll be doing it again during their run of Stoker nominees. So I may or may not host your episode, Jocelyn. It's hard to say. And I also narrate for them, you know, in the in-between of editing anthologies, I'm reading some Slush there too. So I got my hands in there and have been enjoying myself because I love the place. I love Tales to Terrify. Trumpeting them from the rooftops right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should come guest host for us again sometime.
That's
always been fun.
I love to. I'd love to because I love you guys just as much. So
thank you.
So I don't know what possessed me, but I rambled backward a little bit in trying to decide what to do today. And I've edited 5 anthologies. Novus Monstrum is my most recent with Ken McGregor. It's the one people have been talking about a little bit with Ramsey Campbell and Gemma Files and Gwendolyn Keist and a lot of other really good folks, Joe Lansdale. But this is one, Triangulation's Harmony and Dissonance, that I edited back in 2018. And I want to read for you the introduction of this book. It is also a story. I can't believe your grandmother gave you that damn harmonica. The whole drive home, you were breathing in and out of that thing, making sounds that left your father in fits. We had to stop for a potty break, and I picked you up and gave you a little perch on a rest stop picnic table and explained. It's like flying a plane. The really important part, sweetie, is getting off the ground, and then you just have to get the thing landed again, right? Your eyes were wide. If you start here, I showed you just where to find the C and always bring it back to the beginning at the end. It will sound like music, which of course sounds insane. And your response was to watch me very closely and move your mouth like a fish. And in a minute, we were back in the car and you weren't playing. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, trying to figure you out, and you just looked thoughtful. We were getting off the interstate when I heard you say my name. We were getting a light drizzle, but I turned off the wipers to be able to hear you better. Just like a story, right, Mommy? Took me a minute to put it together, but yes, I told you, it's just like a story. Get the plane off the ground, take it somewhere, and get it on the runway again. A song is kind of like a story. Good thinking, dude. Do they come from the same place, Mommy? Songs and stories? You asked. I lied and said I didn't know. And now it's the middle of the night, and I guess I'm not surprised to hear the sound of the harmonica coming in over the air conditioner's white noise. I stand with my head resting against the door frame for a minute, trying to maintain that delicate balance with my footing that keeps the squeaky floorboards from giving me away. The sounds I'm hearing are impossible. Short little bursts of melody, nothing crazy complex or anything, but repeated. New melodies coming to rest on top of old. Counterpoint and harmony. The sound of 2 and then 4 and then a dozen first graders noodling on a harmonica at once. Am I dreaming? Have I lost my mind? The surface tension between not wanting to disturb you and my own breathless, panicked curiosity breaks, and I turn the knob and lean in. Always the fear with this maneuver at this time of night is that the light will be on and you'll be bouncing off the walls in non-sleep. But the lights are not on. For a moment, I struggled to see you. There's too much motion. Pieces of construction paper are flying around the room. The pages are intricately laced with words, your signature backward B evidenced everywhere. The teachers all tell us not to worry about this until you're 7. But my brain can't quite grasp the words because of the motion and the madness of it all. The pages are doing a dance in the air. I spot you. You're wearing those jammies, the ones I secretly hate, and your hair is whipping around your face. Impossibly, improbably, you are standing over the wicker clothes hamper, pulled to the center of the floor from its usual place in the corner behind the door. There's something inside, and the something is lighting up your face, both giving you an expression of joy and casting a fiery orange light there. The harmonica drops from your hand. The music is all around like a chorus of crickets. They do come from the same place, Mommy, and it's wonderful. Your motion is quick, decisive. I leap from the doorway as soon as I catch that it's happening. There is a whoosh sound as the air is sucked out of the room for an instant. Construction paper and stuffed animals rain down on me, and then I am standing over an empty hamper. My ears have popped, and my eyes begin to water. I peer down into the rectangular space. You did it. I'd never been able to do it again, but you've done it. Of course you have. My heart nearly bursts, and I'm crying. I do what there is to do. I sit down on the floor in your room, crisscross applesauce, and fan the pages out in front of me. I begin to read. This next story is from my unpublished collection, They Take Our Best and Other Weird Tales, which Joe Lansdale called Dark Dynamite That Will Knock You in the Tall, Wet Weeds. Having that tattooed somewhere, Joe. The Most Natural Thing in the World by Douglas Gwilym. You're going to tell me to shut up. You'll say I've gone on enough. In a minute, you'll take me for a cracked pot. And I can take it. But I'll feel better if I say this stupid crap. I need to say the words. On Saturday the 27th, I took a few minutes away from my family. The little one was overtired and rocking back and forth on my last nerve. And the whole sky had gone orange like it agreed with her. We were at Kennywood. Old amusement parks have hidden nooks and crannies like skunk got stink, so I slipped into one of those with a cigarette and an eye over my shoulder to spot anyone who might want to try to keep me from soothing my senses. I passed the train station. There was a long line of children there to start up the laughing lady, the robot whack job in a muumuu dress, who guffaws like the one nut in the back row of Johnny Carson's audience when I was a boy. I kept moving. Sign of the season, all the twigs and leaves snapping under my boots, pumpkins smirking everywhere, and people with Kool-Aid beers. Everything decked out in Hot Topic Crowleyisms and severed heads. Kennywood does know how to get its Linus Van Pelt Great Pumpkin Spirit on, and it keeps the park open another couple of weeks and the kids happy into the squirmy first fall days of junior high and elementary, so I won't look a gift cheesy shellacked vampire in the mouth. I found a place to park myself, leaned against the lower support beam of some gut-busting monstrosity I would never ride. I lit another Camel. Somebody's baby, Pavarotti's, I guess, let loose with a squall that made my nostrils flare and my spine thrash like a catfish on a fishing line. I was standing next to a pale fence, and I started moving out along it by sheer force of nervous electrification. At the end of the fence, I realized where I was, back of the midway. I'd seen the spot from the customer side of things. It was employees only for sure. The rusted door next to me was hanging loosely from hinges that were half popped. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world to take a long drag there and not think about the way Uncle Salvador widowed Aunt Betsy one puff at a time. The door opened behind me. It was dark in there, but a tiny motion in the darkness made my eyes follow. I craned my neck with my cigarette behind me defensively, but nobody was paying any mind. I gave the door a creaky shove and went in. It was just a storeroom, piled with too many wheelbarrows, enough potting soil in bags to bury an entire mafia family or shore up New Orleans for good, and packing crates of every shape and size. When I got a good look at where the light was coming from, I laughed out loud. I'd have known the thing anywhere. See, when I was just a little kid, my granddad was the groundskeeper of the Chautauqua Edison Deer Park out in Burrell County. A glorified petting zoo, I grant you, but if you were lucky enough to have been 5 years old with a grandfather with keys to a contained animal kingdom of wolves, alpacas, a trio of kangaroos, and one ailing water buffalo, you'd have known magic. And you'd have known all about how scratching a hand behind an animal's head can self-soothe like no cigarette. Which is all not to say the thing that I mean, that there was one black mark on my secret times at the park, Granddad off shuffling feed and hay someplace in the distance while I explored and befriended what for all I could tell was a Noah's Ark and a world full of natural creatures. It was just a chicken. It was a damn chicken. The mastermind. The last thing Granddad would do on those nights when we were alone together in the park was clean out the cage of a pair of coyotes that had ended their looting spree at a convenience mart on the edge of Newcastle in a melodramatic flash of bear traps and shotgun fire. He was wary of those weird dogs, probably for good reason, and he'd exile me to the hall outside the gift shop for a cool-down lap of wrestling wits with the goddamn cocker-for-dumb-shit-doodle-do rooster. To add insult to injury, the creature had one eye. This is not a joke. I don't know how old you are or what you remember from the pre-PETA days, but these places all had a chicken in a glass box. The chicken or rooster would see you coming, would listen for the drop of shiny quarters into the change tray, and then would come to the front glass and play tic-tac-toe with you like some sort of grand master, dropping its X's next to your O's with a sharp little beak. The model of this wonderful machine in my grandfather's establishment was the mastermind. It proclaimed its name across the top and sides in a banner that looked like it belonged in that movie I've still never seen all of, the one with the creepy carousel that makes the townspeople do its bidding and brings the devil along with it. And it felt right. I'd never beat the thing. I knew there wasn't really a chicken who could play a game like this, but I was a kid, and I never looked at it too close. It felt like a real challenge. Granddad would stick a key in the change tray of the mastermind and give it a twist, leave it open for me to take a lone quarter out again and again, battle that bastard fowl until all the crap was out of the coyote cage and running down the drain into the Chautauqua. It was probably only one summer I went head-to-head with His Majesty the Mastermind, but on the principle of the thing, I had to beat the bird. It just looked at me like it didn't care, which it probably didn't, and beat me coolly and soundly every time. What had started as a cool-down lap for the high of animal love became a blood feud. Beating that prickly, steel-eyed velociraptor in a feather coat became a matter of the survival of my self-respect. Granddad, in fact, pulled the plug before the summer was up, started sending me into the deer cage instead, which had a roof and chicken wire walls and was thus secure enough, if it made the deer nervous. I think he just didn't know how to deal with the wild fluctuations in his only grandkid's blood pressure and the seething that went on in the passenger side of the Jimmy on the way home. I saw the mastermind one last time before I went back to T-ball and trying to kill myself on my 20-inch bike in church parking lots. He was ready, and I was ready. God knows we'd played the game before. A good game of tic-tac-toe is more that ancient art of Japanese calligraphy where you just make O's than it is chess. The game got cooking, and he was clearly going for the diagonal. I made a classic feint that meant we'd probably have a draw, and then it happened. The devil bird fixed me with its only eye and made me feel the contempt deep down. And then, flat out, refused to finish the game. I went to the coin tray, but Granddad was there, gentle hand on my shoulder. Old man always figured a stick of juicy fruit gum was enough to make a kid forget his troubles, and for that moment he was right. He led me away, and I felt better, along with my blood pressure, for a while. But that bird got stuck in my brain like a lone housefly in the Taj Mahal, and now it was decades later. And I was looking at those Something Wicked, that was it, showy banners again. They looked like they'd just been polished. You can imagine what it felt like to come face to flashing glass box with that thing. I laughed, but it was to cover the shock. It was to convince myself it was totally possible. Newcastle wasn't so far away. It was no big deal. I walked to the thing. The power was humming. I had a quarter, and I put it in. The tic-tac board lit up. Gleaming bone poked up from a thick bed of straw. Looked like enough for all the chicken I ate in the 4th grade. I've been stalling, not quite wanting to tell you what I saw in there in that shiny glass box. I don't usually come into this bar. I don't know you, so hell. It wasn't that chicken, animated Halloween style, fluttering around there in a parody of avian life. It was me. Me and Mary, me and my folks, Granddad, like a damn diorama, but real and moving. The thing was empty, dripping and glistening with condensation for just one moment, like it had just been power washed and poorly squeegeed, and then there was a blast, an explosion of water and light and cold, no heat, and then what looked like a single droplet of water the size of a basketball, hovering there, hanging with nothing holding it in place. I kept blinking to take the cray-cray away, but that just made it worse because the insides of my eyelids seemed to light up with the sight. I'm telling you, it was even more real with my eyes closed. So I stared, unblinking. The more I looked, I could see the detail, the look on Mary's face when I gave her the ring. And the one on her face when the business failed and the ring went into hawk. I could see the frown lines fighting the laugh lines on her face. Could see the skeleton under her skin, the bones that held that ring in place. And then I could see the thoughts in that beautiful head of hers, firing and exploding in golds, greens, consuming reds. And then it all moved faster. Like it had just been a roller coaster car hovering at the top, waiting to take the plunge and eat up the screams. Me, the kids, Mary, Granddad's face, the way it looked in his casket, white and unwholesome. It plunged on from that moment last year to this moment in time, past. I watched the kids grow up. I watched them play at being grown in their 20s. I saw them fight and fail and lose heart. I watched the heartache of their loves flushed into the Chautauqua like the contents of that coyote cage. I saw Jimmy talking to the cops with sweat on his face, too many pounds and a guilty look in his eye. Little Margie, grown and pregnant herself, and alone in an empty tea station. And then I saw myself, staggering to keep standing, closing Mary into a damn box, not enough gray in her beautiful hair. The image of the mastermind, of that damn cock, loomed in my head. Only there, maybe, but I heard clucking laughter like the devil. I tried to breathe, and the death stick still lit in my hand made me cough. I slammed both hands into the glass of that cage as hard as I could. It made a sound like an explosion, and I felt like I'd been shot. I fell face down across a 27-pound bag of potting soil. No idea where the cigarette went. Whole rest of the day, I was elbow to elbow with Mary and the kids, who'd settled into a way to tamp down on their frenetic wonder and great pumpkin fervor so as not to have it end too soon. I kept nudging her. Mary kept hugging her. Thing is, I felt like there was somebody else near and watching all afternoon. Dumbest thing in the world, but my gut said it was the laughing lady, the animatronic crazy that stood watch over the train. Felt like she had a question to ask me. Didn't help that I could sometimes hear her cackling madly over the happy screams of the motor chug of the 80-year-old rides, asking that question. Every time I thought it, I shut my mouth. I didn't need Mary wondering what kind of cigarettes I'd really been smoking. And then we were home. Kids so sacked out I dropped them one by one into their beds and they fell without fighting, like pebbles into a well. When the shaft of light from the door pivoted off the last of those faces, little punks, little beauties, little masterminds, I knew. I got it. What had been nibbling and tearing at me over all those years? I got what the bird was saying, taking a stand like that, refusing to finish the game all those years ago. It was saying you couldn't fight it, but you had to anyway. That life was a string of losses, but you didn't have to go softly. With the last light of the doorway disappearing and the blonde summer hair of my boy hovering across my vision, I decided that maybe the failures matter more than any of the successes because they make you see what you're supposed to be, what you've been fighting for all along. I knew this too. I'll be damned if I'll let that chicken win, if I'll let that one way of seeing my life be all there is. There's no fly in the Taj Mahal now. I smashed that old cage into so many pieces, you wouldn't know what it was if you'd built it with your own two hands.
Hey, Daniel, is it just me or did we end up with another little sort of accidental theme this time?
It always tends to work that way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It really does.
yeah, there's just this through line of want and being careful what you wish for. And oh, wow, so creepy and
And
sad.
crazy lyricism. I mean, just wonderful work. Oh my fucking
Just
God.
both of
What the-
them.
Thank
I
you,
know.
Daniel. Thanks so much, man. It means a lot.
Yeah, Joe Lansdale, he's got an eye for talent, I gotta say.
Somebody out there snap up this collection of short stories before it's gone.
Wow.
I don't know
Well,
where it'll go before I self-publish it, I guess.
yeah, I mean, self-publishing can work, but it's so much work. So yeah,
I
you
doubt
know,
very much that's going to be necessary.
yeah, I
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that a lot.
You bet, man.
so Daniel and I are here pretty much every week. And every week has its own character. I think next week we're going to have a lot fewer dead dogs and children.
But you never know, actually.
You never know. I'm thinking that with the readers being SB Divya and Premi Mohammed, the chances are probably 50-50.
Story hour now with fewer dead.
Yeah, with Premi, actually, we can never be sure. But the one thing we can be sure about is that they will be very good stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're looking forward to that. I do recommend checking out storyhour2020.com. That's where we have the calendar of upcoming readers and links to the YouTube recordings of previous readings. And I mean, you can just go to Story Hour 2020 on YouTube. That's her channel. And you can do stuff like there, like subscribe so you never miss a new one. You can poke around in our neatly organized playlists and see what you find. Maybe
Yeah, I
like this
recommend
one.
randomly listening because, man, there's so much good stuff there. I feel like I delve in and then it's a great resource actually to see what's been going on in speculative fiction in the last few years.
Yeah, 6 years and more really, because a lot of people do come on and read older stories, which is great too.
Yeah.
You know, last week, Tobias Espakal read a story that's from an out of print book, and that book does not seem very easy to find anymore. So I was really happy that we had another way to get that story out in the world because it was really fantastic.
All our sins remaindered.
Sorry,
Nothing, just stupid joke. Never mind.
smart Alec. Well, speaking of fantastic, Douglas Gwilym and Jocelyn Szczepaniak-Gillece, thank you very much for this evening of stories. This was really special. Thank you also to SIFWA for the Givers Fund grant that helps us keep this Zoom room open and keep the streams streaming. I don't know how to put that. Seems weird. But most of all, you know, thank you to Daniel Marcus, without whom this Zoom room would not even be a thing. It would just be some no space, not even a Zoom. And that's horrible. Think of that gaping void in our lives where stories belong and aren't. Oh. Thank you for saving us from that. Thank you, Daniel. And,
Thank you.
you know, thank you too. You who are here now in the Zoom, you watching on YouTube, or who knows, maybe some completely different platform at some point in the future, because no matter when you're watching, no matter how you're watching, as long as you are watching these writers read their stories, we are all together in this very same story hour. So don't let the chicken win. Don't unearth the mandrake. And have a good night.